So when my daughter was 3 years old, we had to begin to start thinking about preschool for her and what we were going to do about her education. She was going to go to school, but I have to say that I was absolutely dreading it. I myself had a really bad public school, K through 12 education, and it was not something I was looking to repeat. I had a lot of internal struggles with it, and so I began to pray. And these are the reasons that I brought before the Lord before He led me to homeschooling. These are the concerns that I had. Number one, I wanted to be able to pass on my Christian faith and my worldview to my kids. And I just did not see how that was going to be possible when they were away from home the majority of the day. I mean, they're gone from 7 in the morning until 5 or longer at night if they do sports. And then at that point, they're so exhausted. Where am I going to find the time in order to be able to teach them about Scripture and about God and to have that family community together as we teach our children about Scriptures and about faith and about who God is and lead them to a saving faith in Christ? The other concern that I had was about our Christian worldview and also how to live out the Christian life. Obviously, at such a young age, I was just teaching my daughter more behavioral kind of things like be nice to your brothers, love them, be gentle, be kind. And this was easy enough because I was home with her and I could teach her these things. But then one day I remember looking into her, she was taking a little toddler ballet class with all these little kids, all these little girls. There were maybe about 15 girls in the class, and I looked in the window just to see how things were going. And I saw that all the girls had lined up to get a drink of water at the fountain. But one by one, my daughter was either pushed aside or they asked her if they could go in front of her, to the point where she was very last in line. Now, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But later on, after the class, I asked my daughter about what happened and how come she was the last one in line to get water. And she said to me, well, Mommy, I'm trying to love them and to be nice and to be a good Christian, and so I let them go before me. And in and of itself, that's okay. But at the same time, I could not figure out how to teach her these foundational principles of being a Christian and yet not be a doormat. Because we know that there is a lot of confusion with the two. And I've worked with a lot of kids, and the thing is with children, they don't understand the nuances and they don't understand internal strength and they don't understand all of these other things. It's hard to teach a child to be loving and gentle and kind and then tell them, well, make sure you're first in line. And so how would I do that? How would I do that without turning her off to the faith? Because it's really not an appealing faith if you just say, let everybody go before you, because that's just the way how it's done. Especially because that's not the way how it's done. When we put someone else before us, it comes from a place of actually loving God, of loving ourselves, so that we are able to love our neighbor. And yet, I just could not figure out how I was going to teach any young child, much less a 3, 4, or 5-year-old, how to do this. Number 2, I wanted to build an influential relationship with my kids. Under no situation or circumstance did I ever want to be undermined by a teacher or a coach or any other adult who has no permanent stake in their life. I will be the first one to say that teachers and coaches and these other adults have a huge amount of power in their hands. They are very influential, they are very powerful, and they can do a lot of good in this world, but they can also do a lot of bad. I don't need to be fighting with that. I mean, as a parent, I just knew that once my kids hit adolescence, I did not want to be struggling against them when I would tell them something or share with them something, and yet they heard something different from a teacher or a coach. That's one of the things that I really struggled a lot with. Parents give up a lot of their influence over their children very early on when they send them to school. And that's just something that I did not want with my kids. On top of that, what if that teacher or that coach was not a believer? And yes, people could be like, well, shouldn't they be exposed to all different kinds of things? You're sheltering your kids. No, because there's a thing about sharing with somebody another faith, but there's another thing about being hostile. And I'll have to tell you that I had teachers who were not Christians, and when they found out that I was a Christian, they were extremely hostile toward me. This is not any kind of behavior that anybody should ever be putting up with. I mean, if you think about it, if someone shared their faith with me right now, should I be hostile? I mean, who should ever be that way? And yet I knew that if I put them in school at such tender ages, that if their teacher was hostile toward them or another student, like what were they going to do? And it's just nothing that I wanted to give a foothold to. I wanted to make sure that for as long as possible, I was going to be the most influential person in their life. I wanted to be an adult that they could turn to. And if you think about it, why shouldn't I? I have the most stake in their life. If something happens to them, I am there. I am going to be with my children for the rest of my life or their life. In one way or another, we are affecting one another. So shouldn't we have the most influence on one another? Why should a person who we don't even know anymore, why should they have any kind of influence over my child like that, where they could put a wedge between me and them? Number 3, I wanted my children to have a relationship with each other. If you think about it now, people are living longer than ever. Their sibling relationship is probably going to be, Lord willing, the longest relationship that they have in their life. From birth until, if they live to be 90 or beyond, I mean, think about how long that relationship is going to go. And I wanted that relationship to be solid for them, for their adulthood. So I wanted them to have a shared experience in childhood. I remember once watching my kids play. My daughter was 3 and my sons were 1. And just the enjoyment that they had of each other, making up games and giggling and the jokes that they would tell each other, and all of the little things that they did, the inside kind of jokes that they would do and the pranks that they would pull on each other. And I wanted them to continue that for as long as possible. I wanted them to continue that throughout childhood and into adolescence, to have a shared experience that they could draw from when they became adults and went their separate ways, so that they always had that commonality to pull them together, something to talk about. I feel like not helping our children to love each other and to have a good relationship with each other is a travesty that our communities are all suffering from. Number 4, I did not want to fight with any teacher, any administrator, or any school board ever about anything. As a parent, I did not feel like I should ever have to fight or argue. I mean, even just that alone, I should not have to fight or argue with anyone about something that my child needs. What if one of them is struggling in a subject? Why should I have to fight with somebody about getting my child the help they need? What if one of them is excelling in a particular subject? Why should I have to fight with them in order to get more resources for my child? I remember once one of my sisters was supposed to be in a particular higher level math class in middle school. I believe it was like algebra. But they didn't put her in it because they said they didn't have enough chairs at the beginning of school. And I said, you don't have enough chairs? And so because they didn't have enough chairs yet, because what they were actually doing is they said they were waiting for some kids to drop out of the class and then they would put her in. But I said, like, 1, what if that doesn't happen? And 2, even if you're waiting for that and it's a couple weeks, then that means that she has lost a couple weeks of education. She has lost the first few weeks. So then by the time she goes in, she's going to start struggling. And I got so upset with the school principal at that time, and I just lost it. I think I was in high school. I was maybe almost college, and I remember him saying, just calm down, just calm down. You know, if you know anything about immigrant families, we are like another parent to our younger siblings. And so that's why I was the one taking care of that. And I remember that experience, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to fight with anyone about anything that my child needs. And right now, no matter which way you go, I don't care which way you go, I see a lot of parents fighting school boards over the masking thing with their kids. I mean, they're fighting for or against it. Whatever you want is your choice. But that's where, for me as a parent, I would draw the line, because I'm not fighting with anybody about my kids. It's just not happening. And that was another concern that I brought before the Lord, because I said, Lord, I don't want to fight with anyone. Not only do I just not want to fight with people, I'm not going to fight with them about something that my child needs. And then number 5, we all know, and we have to be able to admit, that there are some awesome teachers out there, but there are just as many, if not more, really bad teachers out there. And with all the distractions of school, there's a lot of things that happen that prevent a child from actually learning anything. I remember teachers being sick. I remember teachers being on maternity leave. I remember them just taking time off, or them going through personal issues and not teaching. Everybody has personal issues. Of course that's expected. Even I have personal issues, and then sometimes I have to cancel. I get that. But at the same time is that I remember my 10th grade history teacher, he was going through a divorce. And I don't remember learning anything that year. I remember learning why they were getting a divorce. And I remember learning how depressed he was and how much he hated divorce attorneys and things like that. But I don't recall learning anything about social studies. And then, of course, when test time comes, I had no idea what I was doing. And these kind of examples of things happening where I was not able to learn Another example was in 6th grade, the teacher had assigned seats, and I remember being put in the middle, all the way in the back, but in the middle, surrounded by boys. I could not hear a thing. I don't remember a thing that she taught in 6th grade. And I went up to her one day after school and I asked her, I said, "Teacher, I can't hear anything. The boys keep distracting me. I can't hear. I don't know what you're saying. And they keep bothering me so much. Can you please move me?" And she said, "No." She said, "I need you to sit there because I need you to help me control the boys." And so my entire 6th grade, I didn't learn a thing. I remember all the things that the boys were always teasing me about and showing me and everything else, but I did not learn a single thing. So then by the time I went into 7th grade, I was so behind. Okay, at this point, I did not know what they were doing in math. My reading was always excellent, but that's because of my own personal self. But my math and grammar and everything else, I had no clue what was going on. And this is what led me to my 5th reason. Teachers have their place, but in the end, they are human and they make mistakes. And I wanted to make sure that my child was not going to be a victim of those mistakes. They hold so much power, and especially in high school, if things happen like I was sharing with you in history, it's not that the child is stupid then, right? It's not that they are slow and they can't pick things up. It's because of just the fact that they were not given the materials, that their teacher held everything in their hands and the kids didn't know how to learn, they didn't know what else to do, and so they just end up failing. It's not the child. Why should a child then have to suffer for the fact that a teacher or a substitute or whatever is not able to do that job that year? Which is completely understandable sometimes. I mean, like, life goes on. So I wanted to make sure that my kids had the ability to teach themselves. I wanted them to be able to learn out of a textbook. I did not want them to be reliant upon any teacher. And this has paid off so well for them. I did not want them to be reliant upon any teacher. I wanted them to be able to teach themselves. I wanted them to be able to slow down material for themselves if they needed to. I wanted them to be able to speed up material so that in the end, their education was in their hands and their future was in their control. And those were the reasons why I was struggling so hard as to whether or not I should put my daughter in preschool. I did not want to do it. And so I began to pray to the Lord. And I have to tell you that God answered my prayers, and every single one of those concerns were addressed for me.